of all, I think everybody will close the camera and the audio and the video, unless the speakers would please open their videos when they speak, and then their mics as well. Okay, so shall I start?
Yes, go ahead. The meeting is now live on Facebook and being recorded.
Thank you so much, distinguished panel, speakers, guests, and everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, from wherever you are. We're all here today around this table, actually speaking in front of our mics and screens, unfortunately. Maybe next time we'll be on a real table, joining each other to have a talk on climate change and gender equality. Introduce myself. My name is Yara Ouda. I'm the regional focal point for Western Asia, MENA region at the Major Group for Children and Youth, and I'm currently working at the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in Egypt. It's a great honor to have this, to organize this side event and have such a fruitful discussion on gender equality and climate talk with distinguished leaders from government organizations, business, private sector, and civil society and youth representatives. There were other speakers joined, however. Please, if everybody could make their mute themselves. However, due to commitments of people and tight time, didn't join, so we're pleased to have today a couple of speakers that would take us to this fruitful discussion. Before starting, I'd like to extend my appreciation and honor to Her Excellency Dr. Hala Saeed, Minister of Planning and Economic Development, for supporting this event, where Dr. Sharifa Sharif, Director of the National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, will be on behalf of her today. So we are glad that we have you, Dr. Sharifa. And also, before giving briefs about speaker and the floor for them, I'm pleased to lead on such a sideline session at the 2022 ECOSOC Youth Forum titled Endorsing Gender Equality Towards Combating Climate Change. I really appreciate the efforts of my colleague, my dearest colleague, Dr. Sameh first, for his collaboration. And I'll give the floor to Sameh now to take you through the ECOSOC Youth Forum purpose and the HLPF, and then we go for the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yara. It's a pleasure to have this side event in collaboration between the Arab Youth Platform for Sustainable Development at the League of Arab States and IMCS Pax Romana. Always IMCS is a platform that is welcoming partnerships and supporting youth. One of the strongest organizations in the world, if not the strongest in the world, that is supporting youth. And also proud of the support of the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth, the General Assembly mandated platform for children and youth to participate at the United Nations and in intergovernmental processes. We're also thankful for the forum that is giving space to young people, space to engage in dialogue with member states and other actors on concrete action to rebuild and recover from COVID-19 and to advance towards the implementation of Sustainable Development Goals. This year's Youth Forum will address the theme of the ECOSOC and the 2020 United Nations High-Level Political Forum on Sustainable Development on building back better from COVID-19 while advancing the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda. I just wanted to thank you personally. I wanted to thank my dear colleague Yara, Dr. Sharifa, Dr. Mahmoud, Ms. Sarah, for the time and your efforts that are being put into this presentation. So without further ado, I would like to turn back to Yara. Just wanted to say a few welcoming remarks at the beginning. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sameh. And now we're going to have the discussion with the distinguished speakers that we have. First of all, we have Dr. Sharifa Sharif, the Director, National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. I'll give a short brief about Dr. Sharifa. She is she serves on several ministerial committees in Egypt, among them administrative reform, civil service capacity, capacity building, Egyptian Government Excellence Award, Egyptian Anti-Corruption Committee, and the African Peer Review Mechanism. She's a professor of public administration at the Faculty of Economics and Political Science, Cairo University. Dr. Sharifa also holds position of Vice Dean for Environment and Community Services, as well as chairperson of the Public Administration Cairo University in Egypt. And of course, for more achievements that Dr. Sharifa is doing. So here you have the floor. We'd like you to talk to us about the role of the institution in promoting gender equality and combating climate change throughout human development, building capacities, achieving social inclusion as well, throughout the initiatives taking place, such as Road to COP27 and Be an Ambassador. And personally, I'm proud being one of the graduates from Be an Ambassador initiative, where I learned a lot. I'd like you also to inform everybody about such events, so that we can have further collaboration by the end as a conclusion to the. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Yara. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending where you are on the earth. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Dr. Saeed, greetings from Cairo. It's with great pleasure to be with you today. For those who don't know me, as Yara just presented me, I'm also alongside the Executive Director for the National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development and a Professor of Public Administration. I'm also a newly elected ECOSOC SIPA member, and I actually attended the last meeting in April 22, where the theme was building back better and moving forward from COVID-19, which is aligned, of course, with today's session. And during the session, the youth session acknowledged the importance of youth participation and engagement in building back better post-COVID-19. So we're here to discuss and share knowledge and accelerating the implementation of our agenda.
Dr. Sharifa, I believe you're muted.
Is that okay? So further engagement ensures alignment of youth, and more youth participation and investment in youth-led initiatives will assure that we're on the right track to 2030. As we're approaching 2030, we are in need of a systemic change in the MENA region and the continental level. And with COVID-19, with its social, economic, and health implications, highlighted the importance of global coordination and acceleration of our global goals. Raising awareness, improving sustainable literacy is key to the implementation process of the agenda. And youth around the world have been on the forefront of activities and initiatives furthering the 2030 agenda. A few of the impactful, successful examples I'd like to share with you today are the Arab Youth Climate Movement and Youth for Governance from Lebanon, the Butterfly Project from India and Act 2030, as well as our own ambassadors for sustainable development in Egypt. Bearing in mind just a couple of numbers to share with you today, 60% of the Egyptian population, where we have reached 104 million to date, are under the age of 25. So you can know the magnitude of the impact of youth in Egypt. And supporting the efforts of the government of Egypt in investing in human capital and in alignment of Egypt's Vision 2030, we have invested in the past years in capacity building for youth on different levels. So in 2021, the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development, alongside the National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development, launched its national initiative, Ambassadors for Sustainable Development, or Be an Ambassador. Just to give you an idea of who we are, we, of course, we're the training arm of the Ministry of Planning, but we're also a think tank and advisory body to the government, catering to government, private sector, and civil society. And our goal is to create awareness and promote good governance practices for the implementation of Egypt's Vision 2030 and the SDGs. The Ambassadors Initiative is gender-sensitive, inclusive, peer-to-peer model that aims on building national capacities through experiential learning in the areas of sustainable development and bridging the gap of sustainability literacy. This initiative includes a series of basic and technical courses, meet the expert webinars, as well as a TOT, or training of trainers portion. The main aim is to support the expansion of sustainability advocacy, knowledge, skills, and mindsets. The initiative is a youth-led initiative. The team responsible for the delivery of this program is all youth under the age of 35, ensuring the ownership and raising the awareness of the fundamental understandings of SDGs, enabling policies, opportunities, and challenges facing Egypt to achieve the goals. And this ensures the comprehensive, equitable, sustainable development, as well as the localization of the sustainable development goals. I'm going to just give you a couple of numbers that we're going to work with here just to elaborate more on the initiative. So we launched or we opened applications in 2021, and we got 7,000 applications. And out of the 7,000 applications, we filtered out 1,000 youth between the age of 18 and 35. So the first cohort was of 1,000 youth, gender sensitive, as I said before, and inclusive, targeting public, private universities, as well as civil society. We were able to reach out to 24 universities and across the 27 governorates. We also had another cohort, the second cohort, which targeted 50 participants from the media sector. And the third cohort we're working on currently. We opened again for applications, and to date, we reached 3,000 applications. And again, our target is another 1,000 youth by the end of 2022. So basically the statistics, if we're talking about the first cohort, we had 364 women, 394 men, and 7 differently abled, ensuring equity and inclusion. Our keynote speaker, and it was an honor to have him with us, His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud was with us in the graduation ceremony for the first cohort, and where we gave the participants, they became certified trainers, and the certification, it has a 2-year expiry date to ensure the reactivation of the certificate. The trainers have to train from 150 to 200 of their peers in the span of 2 years. The intended impact of the initiative was to create awareness and disseminate knowledge of SDGs on a peer-to-peer model level, youth empowerment and voice, adding skill set with positive effect on employment, assessing sustainability literacy, and promoting green startups. Through our ambassadors initiative, we created our alumni association, and the graduates of the program will soon be joining an advanced program on climate change, again, to capitalize on COP27 and Egypt's role in the COP27. So we're spinning out the original idea to touch on climate change issues. We're going to introduce the graduates to advanced topics in climate change in cooperation with different international institutions like the NIDO, UNICEF, Strathclyde, University of Dundee, and El Maktoum. And in September 2022, the graduates also of this program will be assigned another phase in a different level to, again, train peers, but from primary to secondary levels. And again, we launched during the graduation another initiative called Green Minds, targeting children, again, or kids from primary to secondary ages. And this, again, will aim on training them on climate change and how to save our planet in very simple terms through extracurricular activities. To ensure that we're all speaking the same language, the Institute, in cooperation with content development experts, developed several training tools. We developed a TOT manual, and we also created a learning management system called Istidama, which has more than 54 interactive programs, gamification, lectures, and videos on sustainable development and climate change. And we also launched the first Arabic dictionary for sustainable development terminology in Arabic. Through the Ambassador Initiative came a wealth of ideas and initiatives promoting sustainability. And with the support of Cairo University's FEPS incubator, we established the first Sustainable Innovation Lab to take all these ideas and work on them. The lab supports these ideas through different activities like hackathons, incubation, and acceleration. That's a brief idea about the Ambassadors Initiative. We have other initiatives and programs that are also targeting gender or women empowerment and gender equality. We have our two flagship programs, women empowerment programs that target all ages. First of all, the first initiative is She for a Digital Future in cooperation with Cisco. This initiative attempts to bridge the gap, the gender digital divide to complement the Digital Egypt strategy, providing training courses in general and advanced computer skills and gender parity and financial inclusion, and as well as sustainable development issues, as well as climate change topics. The program is a blended program. We trained 2,000 women to date, and we are approaching towards the end of 2022. We're aiming at training another 8,000 actually. The institute also launched in 2019 two other women leadership programs on the national level and on the continental level. Both programs equip women with knowledge they need on topics related to climate change and both agendas, the Egypt's Vision 2030 and Agenda 2063, the Africa we want. On the national level, we reached out to approximately 4,000 women across 12 governorates and aiming to cover the rest of the 27 governorates by 2022. And on the continental level, we reached out to 450 women from 45 countries. So again, one of our main pillars as an institute is gender equality and inclusion. With this, and to stick to the time frame I'm working with here, the 10 minutes, I don't want to take more of your time. I just want to conclude by saying I'm a great believer of the power of youth. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to share.
Thank you, Dr. Sharifa Sharif, the Director for the National Institute for Governance and Sustainable Development. Such a fruitful exchange of information, data, and we're really pleased that these initiatives are reaching out to more youth in Africa and around the world. And as per our conversation previously when we met, that you wanted to also expand these initiatives in their access and outreach. So I think that this could be a chance today that we could open this chance, or Your Excellency, of course, open others to join, and we can find out the methodology as part of the outcome of such a meeting.
Definitely, and this is upon Her Excellency Dr. Hala Said's approval. We had originally, the original idea of being the Ambassador Initiative was to reach out to a wider audience of youth across the MENA region and across the continent. So definitely I'm with you, and it's an incredible opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharifa. And now I'd like to introduce His Excellency Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin, the UN Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Agenda, UN Climate Change High-Level Champion, and the UN Climate Change High-Level Champion for COP27. Allow me please to give a small brief about His Excellency. Thank you first of all for being here today, being very quick responsive to our messages, asking you to join us. Dr. Mahmoud Muhyiddin is an economist with more than 30 years of experience in international finance and development. Currently, he serves as an executive director at the International Monetary Fund, representing 11 countries. Dr. Mahmoud was appointed by the Egyptian government as the climate action champion at the 2022 United Nations Climate Change Conference, COP27, with aims at enhancing the communication between the Egyptian presidency of COP27. Business, private sector, and international funding institutions. Since February 2020, Dr. Mahmoud has been the United Nations Special Envoy on Financing the 2030 Development Agenda. He is also the former Minister of Investment of Egypt from 2004 to 2010, and most recently served the World Bank Group as Senior Vice President for Development Agenda. Of course, there is a lot to tell about Your Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud. I just want you to give the floor for you now to give us more about yourself, and also talk to us about Egypt's presidency and the preparations for COP27, and how do you see it mobilizing resources and finances for climate change could take place this year out of the most, especially that there were many questions coming ahead from the youth saying that there are still challenges achieving the other 17 goals until the 21st century now. So how can the best happen achieving climate change, tackling the challenges of climate change and reaching out to solutions this year, carrying it ahead to 2030? The floor is yours. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much. I hope that you can hear me well. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And it's a great pleasure indeed for me to join this session. Thank you so much, Yara and colleagues, for inviting me to this important discussion. And congratulations for picking a very important topic to tackle, endorsing gender equality towards combating climate change is a very important and critical issue that without sufficient attention to it, it could be ignored in a world that is facing multiple crises and facing a perfect storm after the other. Before getting into the specifics related to what we should be expecting through your partnership and collaboration from COP27, I like to benefit more from the participation in this distinguished panel by just sharing a couple of issues of concern and perhaps get some of your reactions to them. Already listened to Dr. Sharifa Sharif. I'm looking forward as well to the intervention by Ms. Battuti in a few minutes. But we cannot really talk about the preparations for the very important events related to the climate leading to the summit in November without addressing the challenges the world had been facing since the announcement by the WHO back in March 2020 that coronavirus has reached a level of a pandemic. And since then, we have seen this kind of disastrous impact on lives and livelihoods. And it's a very strong reminder of what happened, that whenever there is a crisis, women and the youth are being affected the hardest. It's becoming really typical that whenever there is an economic, financial, social, natural, or health disaster, to see that the more vulnerable of women and youth are being affected the most, and very little is being done first on the prevention from that to be reoccurring, or from handling the impact once it happened, including actually some of the very realized impacts of COVID, when we saw children losing more than a year of education due to school closures, with 1.6 billion children out of school globally. And again, you will find that girls are more affected badly by this. Another crisis that will have a kind of a long-term scar on development. And it's good that you spoke, Yara, earlier about the 2030 agenda that includes SDGs And that is very much a strong reminder of the impact of these crises on SDG 5, on gender, on SDG 4, on education. And of course, when it comes to employability, this is again a kind of strong reminder of what could happen in addition to the crisis we are facing in the labor market today, or in jobs and inclusive growth, SDG 8. Before the next storm that I'm going to tackle, so we just talk about the first perfect storm, the COVID-19 and its implications on lives and livelihoods. And we saw some reactions that by the international development community that could be considered very much as necessary, but not sufficient. We saw the issuance of the SDRs, the special drawing right, $650 billion by the IMF. We saw some announcements by the G20. Some of them had been fulfilled, like the debt service suspension initiative, but then it stopped at the end of last year. It had many good effects on the low-income countries. But again, it stopped, and then it was replaced by an initiative to deal with the implications of COVID crisis on debt through the common framework of the G20, which so far is not functioning. It was announced, but it's not really operationalized fully, and it needs a lot to be stepped up to be operational. And then we saw an initiative by the Secretary General of the UN jointly with the Prime Ministers of Canada and Jamaica in dealing with financing for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, focusing on the recovery and building back better. And I'm happy that your session today in this ECOSOC Youth Forum is dealing with the recovery and how to build back better. Like this time last year, people started to be a bit optimistic that with vaccinations rolling out and some injections of public finances, that 2022 could be a year of recovery. But unfortunately, the disruptions in the supply chain, the impact of war, the lockdowns because of Corona again and its different variants around the world had been really compromising the performance on the recovery front. And you will be hearing in the forthcoming days from different institutions meeting here in Washington, D.C. During the spring meetings of the IMF and the World Bank, that the growth projections for this year had to be revised down. Inflation rates estimates had to be revised up, and the prospects of employment in many developing economies and emerging markets are not really as good as one would have hoped. And this requires lots of immediate actions, starting really by ending the war, because it has serious implications on human lives. There are many people who are losing their lives and becoming casualties of war that needs to be stopped. And of course, we have been following the impact of this war on food prices and shortages of food in many countries. So the food prices increases have been mirrored in the case of African countries as threats of hunger and famine. In addition to that, there is an increase in fuel prices. Add to that a third aspect, an increase on financial challenges. So terrible implication that could be summarized by the 3 F's of food, finance, and fuel crisis. And coming from farming background, I'm really concerned as well about the impact of shortage of fertilizers in the future production of agricultural essential products, including, of course, food. So this is as bad as it is, and with all of what we have today, I'm not wondering much why the attention to the most impactful challenge that our people and our planet are facing are being sidelined in many countries. If you are facing all of these immediate challenges, it's very rare really to see people talking, let alone putting adequate funding and finance to where it matters in dealing with the impact of climate on the health of the planet. We know how dangerous the situation is becoming, and even the recommendation that came up from the Paris Agreement back in 2015 to keep the global warming at 2 degrees above the industrial level are not sufficient. So we need to reduce that even further by to reach 1.5, and hence the call for keeping 1.5 degrees alive. But very little is being done. Still, we see that report from the IPCC, or the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is telling us that the world is not really moving in the right direction. We are drifting from targets. We know that we have to reduce emissions by 2030 by around 45% of the current emissions. We are not meeting that target. Actually, we're adding emissions by roughly 14 to 15%. So are deviating from target by 60%. And again, the work required on adaptation that had been ignored for years and years, with a generous assumption that we're doing a good job in the mitigation. Now we failed in the mitigation side, and we're not ready in adaptation, like in the investments in our coastal areas to protect our shores and beaches and our houses and dwellings close to the seas and oceans. We're not doing sufficiently well in water management and agriculture and the impact on food systems. So the whole thing, if you need to summarize it, and what we need to deal with immediately, is to revive the interest in investments in human capital, in health and education, for people to survive in this kind of more difficult world that we are facing. We need to invest in infrastructure, including digital infrastructure, and we need to invest definitely on energy, food system, and water management as part of this holistic approach in infrastructure. And related to that, invest in resilience and sustainability of societies and economies. Invest. This means money, and the money now is being captured in immediate areas of concern after 2 years of being spent to deal with the COVID-19 crisis. And many countries have very little fiscal room to maneuver within. Many countries are facing, developing economies and emerging markets in particular, are facing severe debt challenges, with many of them are under threat of default. So there is no way but to avoid having some sort of a siloed approach to dealing with the matter of climate, because as we know, some people argued that climate change could be summarized in dealing with mitigation. Mitigation could be reduced into carbon reduction or decarbonization, and decarbonization could be helped by having a price or on carbon. This is all great, but this is not going to be sufficient. Holistic approach through the SDG-based kind of function, where you have a whole of system, whole of government, whole of society working together, including youth and women, to provide solutions to the current challenges that we're facing. Siloed and partial approaches and providing half solutions will not really provide half results. Perhaps a good welcome news is that we see some better attention to what should be done, led by youth. And I'm happy with your generation, and perhaps the younger generation, to you, Yara, and the young participants in this call, that they are now bridging gaps of leadership and raising the bar higher, reminding us of the dangerous situation that we are in, and calling for more actions where actions is required. And this is basically the center of priority for COP27. It's not about claims, it's not about pledges, it's not about new announcements. It's basically about taking actions from these summits to solutions in the field where it matters. For every idea that had been floating around, if it could be implemented, we need to implement it. For every proposal that could be practical and feasible, it has to be projectized. It has to be put into operation in the field. But that requires leadership. And we're missing in many circles the leadership of women. Just 1/3 of decision-making roles under the UNFCCC, Kyoto Protocol, and Paris Agreement are occupied by women. Just 1/3. Should be 50%. Only 15% of environment ministers are women. It should be at least 50%. Only 1/3 of 192 national energy frameworks include gender considerations. Gender also rarely taken into account in climate financing, and those who are supporting it are not really seeing issues related to gender are included sufficiently well in those 192 national energy frameworks. They need to be engendered. Reflect on all of that and these challenges, that supporting a just transition remains the best way to not only accelerate climate change, but also to achieve gender equality and reduce inequalities, creating a situation that can really protect the vulnerable more. A striking figure that I came across from the speech of the Secretary General that he delivered back in March the 14th during the events of the Commission on Status of Women, the CSW, when he emphasized that women and girls face the greatest threats and deepest harm when it comes to the climate crisis, pollution, desertification, and biodiversity loss. And I quote, "When climate disasters strike, research shows that women and girls are up to 14 times, 1/4, are 14 times more likely to die than men. Compounding all these factors, gender discrimination mean that only a tiny proportion of landowners and leaders are women." Just to give another dimension, if you are taking it from that global perspective into localized perspective. So what we should be expecting more, as I said, the issues related to women, youth, and the climate are critically important to the COP hosted by Egypt. And we see those specific recommendations, and I hope that you can partner with us in implementing them. Some of these recommendations are coming from the state actor side. I'm representing the non-state actors, but we work for the same cause and objectives to protect the planet and the people. The first recommendation is to promote gender-sensitive perspective within adaptation, mitigation, and responses, including by incorporating gender equality and women's empowerment within the NDCs. So it's very much up to you here. If you see the nationally determined contributions coming, or the NDCs coming from different countries, are not engendered enough, are not budgeted for enough to reflect this kind of commitment, we need really to raise the alarm and to demonstrate alternatives to what is being presented. Don't just stop silent and see that happen without a reaction. The second, strengthen women's voice and agency and meaningful participation in environmental governance, including by appointing more women in environment-related decision-making structures and promoting the leadership of rural women. So here it's up to you to monitor what's happening at the country level, at the national and subnational level in the different decision-making bodies. The third is leveraging opportunities for women within the just transition to green and blue economy, including by facilitating and ensuring women's improved access to and control over land, finance, and productive resources, knowledge, and smart technologies. And here, this requires more investments in the qualifications and skills of women to and youth, definitely, to be leaders in these areas that are requiring lots of knowledge and great deal of preparations. Number 4, tackle differential health and social implications of environmental issues in women, including by enhancing access of women to family planning services. These family planning services need always to be made available, affordable for the fair choice of women and their families. Promote educational and behavioral change on women and climate change. And this requires, again, lots of awareness, lots of training, and it's good that the training arm of the Ministry of Planning of Egypt, as an example of what could be done, is adequately represented here. Number 6 is about promoting knowledge data generation and analysis on women-specific aspects and gender aspects related to climate change. And the 7th recommendation, the final one, is applying women-specific perspectives in financing for climate change, including by integrating the principles of gender equality into climate action finance and including women's needs related to the environment in gender-responsive budgeting efforts. So this brings me to a conclusion of what I plan to share with you. That we need your participation and your voice, that with these storms, perfect storm after the other, we need to keep the issues related to the vulnerability of the people and the planet high on the agenda. They need really to be high on the agenda for the ministers of finance, for governments, and for the stakeholders. One area that I like to mention before I conclude, and it could be providing a good segue to Ms. Sarah Batouti, because I had discussions with her just a couple of days ago. One of the most promising projects in my home country, Egypt, is the project or the initiative Haya Karima, or Decent Life. It's basically about localization or localizing the Sustainable Development Goals and building back better, or rebuilding the villages, the small towns better, through investments in infrastructure, in human capital, and on resilience. And I would start by the investments in human capital, in education and health. This could be a very good test of our ability to translate all of these global frameworks and commitments and the words that are shared in the summits, to reflect them into localized platforms and making a change where it matters, at the village level, at the last mile, at the towns, where the people who are in more need of help and support could really be part of the solutions going forward by investing in them better today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud, for your intervention. It was very fruitful, and the recommendations, I've just noted them down because I think we're going to proceed ahead with these recommendations after this meeting. And also thank you for tackling the points from different perspectives, from the women perspective, investment, government, non-state actors perspective. So I think it was rich for everyone hearing us now, and I wish I could say more. However, I need to go to the next speaker as time is running, but thanks for your support a lot. The next speaker is Ms. Sarah Batouti. She's the chairman of ECOSOC. Ms. Sarah. She then studied
Yeah, right. You need to unmute, because when they mute you all are unmuted. So unmute and repeat, please.
Thank you so much, Mahmoud. So in 2014, Ms. Sarah was appointed as a senior advisor to the Egyptian president, focusing on sustainable community development. And in 2017, Ms. Sarah was selected as a member of the board at the American University of Cairo, in Cairo. for the Cairo Department of Engineering School of Agriculture. And please correct me if I said anything wrong about her bio. She is also the chairman founder of ECOSOC, Egypt's leading green architecture firm. Her booming latest project was Mumban for eco-friendly furniture that's made out of wasted wood scraps. Also, Ms. Sarah has lots of achievements in the Haya Karima initiative.
Very beautiful, baby.
Haya Karima initiative, as Dr. Mahmoud just mentioned. Also, I'd like to see the perspective of the private sector, giving us example of how the private sector works in a country like Egypt, and how could it be a role model, or how could it be a good model for other countries as well, to be pioneers in development in their countries. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Hi, Yara. Thank you very much. And I know that that the bio has several, tricky words in there, but you did really well. So thanks a lot, and thank you so much for including me in this incredibly important discussion. Nice to see you, Sameh, in person as well. And yes, thank you for paving the way to my talk. Hello?
Interruption? Yes, please. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem whatsoever. So if you allow me, I will just share a couple of slides just to make some visual element to what I'm saying.
Look both ways before you cross the street, little nigga.
All right. Sorry again. I think, Sarah, you have access now to the screen, right?
It's still disabled. So if you don't mind, can you try?
Sameh, please, could you help?
Yes, you're now co-host.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. Okay. So let me just start off by actually looking at the ecosystem of bridging these two paradigms together. So we're talking about women and private sector.
Sorry, Sarah, could everybody please mute themselves? Thank you so much.
Okay. And bridging the discussion of climate change, but also how this affects women, and then how the private sector can actually move on from that and build on that. So as a founder of 2 green businesses, these are inherent informations that we need to have embedded with us in order for us to move forward and be climate. So to start off, if we're looking at Egypt, the bigger picture, there has to be a realization that climate change is affecting all of us across, it's affecting all income groups, it's affecting all genders, all ages, etc. The way climate change is received is very, very geographic. So what happens to women living in coastal areas is very different than landlocked areas, urban and rural communities. However, there are major themes that exist. In our part of the world, it's definitely heat stress, and it's definitely drought.
It's very cute, baby.
Is there a particular mic that we can mute?
Yeah, if the I don't know if the person could leave if there's a problem, or we could control the mute, please.
Yes, I think it's controlled now.
Thank you.
Right. So if I move on from this slide, this is just to indicate to you that it's not all a level playing field. This is the first thing. Second thing is, where are women in all of this? The levels of climate endorsed issues in women's lives is where you find many, many differences than that of men. And it's across income. So the first thing is you have to think about what happens when, you know, you have a plot of land or you have a business and it's not going very well. What happens? People move. They look for income and livelihood elsewhere. Women do not tend to move. They are not as, you know, they have a lot to move. They have a family, they have children, they are also caregivers and caretakers. So their responsibilities as to how agile they are or how flexible they are to moving around to solve an issue is very different than that of men. At the same time, when you have women getting into the working aspect or getting into the field, they usually tend to come into the workplace a little later because they have to be caregivers and caretakers at certain points. Lack of knowledge, lack of financing, and also lack of inclusion, which I'll touch on later. So this is, you know, this is the field, basically. This is where you need to start. And I think it's very important to look at Haya Karima as a project, because it's not you know, that is the title or the name of the project, but it is actually looking at half of the Egyptians living with livelihoods that are directly to do with agriculture livelihoods in increasing heat in Egypt in a specific income strata. These are almost 60 million Egyptians. So you're talking about half of the population. So it's not a project. It is an entire shift in how we do our development. We're absorbing something that is very big. For the private sector, Haya Karima or rural resilience or climate resilience in rural communities isn't something that could be treated with a time frame either. It really is a completely untapped market and a completely new potential that we have to seek to find solutions, and we have to integrate in how we do our businesses. Otherwise, you're not doing good business. You're not using half of your customer or half of your know-how, and you're not reaching out enough further. We've isolated ourselves to a particular consumer in our cities with an income group and then discarded the rest. In that sense, then we can't talk about climate change or climate solutions. We just talk about bad weather. So we really have to take this quite seriously in terms of how are women affected by climate change. In our line of work, when we look at housing and we look at buildings, we really look at the different levels and the effects of how climate change affects somebody, from your income, which is direct risk, to how you spend. I mean, for instance, 30% of women's household income is going into heating and cooling. That's a substantial number. That is a third of what she earns. Therefore, I need to understand how she divides her income in the house. If it's on my end, because I make green buildings, I shouldn't make buildings that are overheating or trapping heat, and I shouldn't make buildings that are too open up so that it's freezing cold. I know that this is a solution I need to propose, but my KPI, my main indication of what I'm doing is right or wrong, is that 30% that person is saving is not wasted. It could be utilized in better education, better healthcare, training, etc. It doesn't need to be there to treat what we call in our industry stupid buildings, which is the opposite of a smart building. And it's important to know that all of these terminologies that we are getting need to be domesticated. So for instance, what is the definition of a smart village or a smart city in another context, in another kind of geography? It's very different than what we need here, because I have to look at access to information, I have to look at trends, I have to look at culture, and I have to look at this family module. So the way to include women's problems and solutions is to understand them at the domestic level very well, is for us to get our market data right. The way for us to go forward and grow businesses is that companies that know their data right, that are implementing it on a very, very domestic level, are the ones that are being financed because they get from A to B in the quickest time. And then you know that that very domestic level is an excellent way of interpreting, say, bottom-up needs. Okay, so you have to understand, if you are making an iPhone, no, not an iPhone, a phone, okay? This phone is not a smartphone if people can't use it. I can't declare that it's smart. I can't declare that it's sustainable. There are so many definitions that really need to be put to the test, and you will find that such a great portion of them have been overcomplicated because they're not being done for a market like that. Because we don't tap into that very domestic, very real, very rural level, and then it's very easy. The best way to build on it is to go to a woman in a rural community and ask her, show me how you spend your wage. You will identify, she doesn't know that she's spending it on cooling. She's spending it responding to the weather. That's as far as she knows. However, I know that the module that she is living in is not attending to her needs to save her the right money. So household income is incredibly important when we talk about women and climate change. Why? Because at the end of the day, the woman is being audited or monitored on how she brings in the household income to make the lives of the whole family better. If she's not using it well, she will not be sent to school. She will not work, So really tackling the gender issue on climate change is incredibly important. Then there are other things. 20% of household income goes on water wastage. These are huge numbers, let alone that the price of vegetables and food is going up and down and transport costs and blah, blah, blah. But I'm talking about really understanding what these numbers mean and how we can attribute to them as the private sector to solve them. And therefore, when you really think about the role of the built environment, and built environment here is not building, it is that setup of how things work together. In order for it to enhance gender equality, it's very important to know that at the rural level community, we need to approach this in a very close and very informal and very sort of open and qualitative way as well, not just quantitative, but qualitative. So we understand the community that we're trying to serve. So I've touched on rural communities because it is incredibly important. Now I want to get to the nitty gritty, which is, I feel that it's important. Right. So very basic terms. There are climate change problems that will require solutions in the form of adaptation and mitigation. Adaptation is doing something about the problem, and mitigation is stopping it from happening. Okay, one is expensive, the other one is a bit more complicated. Right? So adaptation and mitigation have their own issues on themselves. What we are looking at now is that who are the people that are going to resolve these problems for women? Who are the people that are addressing it? From the get-go, these solutions require women to go into science, technology, engineering, mechanics, the whole lot, that whole area of study, of fields of studies, already starts with just 30% of women that go into this kind of study, and that's it. The rest are all men. So already the education system is not equal in any way, shape, or form. By the time they get onto companies, they reach, decision-making positions, it dwindles down to almost 20%. And then you get the real influence of the private sector in the decision-making, where in our case, in the private sector, only 3% of CEOs of these very companies that are going to solve these very solutions for women happen to be women. So it's a natural progression from something wrong at the beginning. I have a problem at the beginning. Culture, society, the way family is being shaped, norms are all telling women, do not become part of the problem. You are part of the problem, but do not become part of the solution. So this is exactly the kind of rhetoric and the kind of discussion that we need to have. Where is the problem? It's not in women being decision makers. It's from the very beginning. It's from girls not going into the fields And all of these fields will be financed, but they will be financed for men. So this is what we need to work on at COP. This is what we need to work on for COP Egypt, COP Africa, COP the MENA region. We have to start building up on this awareness of where this problem is, so that when we do get that 3% CEOs, they are able to be financed. When they have to leave in and out of business, and it happens to all of us, okay, where we have to actually start re-delegating some of our business, some of our work and everything, what do you do when you come to hire other women in your companies? I see it all the time in mine. When I come to hire engineers that are environmentally tech, knowledgeable and everything, I get one woman's CV versus 10 CVs. So I'm part of that vicious cycle anyway. This is where we need to really hit home with our solutions. From the other perspective, so I've talked about education and then coming and becoming a business owner and then taking decisions, but also we need to look at the forces that are acting here. I have one force, which is the future of climate solutions. And the future of climate solutions can, it can look a bit crazy. I don't know the word, but it can look a bit mad, because you are actually talking about a future where if you do not like something, go and create a metaverse, parallel world and solve it there. This is where the future is headed. This is cryptocurrency, this is AI, it's about metaverse, it's about alternate universes, it's about spaces that aren't spaces. That's the future. But the market on the ground in Africa and in North Africa is not that. And that is a wake-up call for the financial community, it's a wake-up call for government, and it's a wake-up call for what we celebrate as leadership in general. I cannot be a leader if I am leading 10% of people and I'm not leading the rest. And these are just some of the recommendation: localize the SDGs, identify and disseminate the information in the way that people get it, not leaders get it, people, because this kind of information is necessary for as many people as possible. COP27 offers a lot of opportunities, which I've mentioned. Solutions in general need to be affordable and accessible. Technology is cultural. It needs to be verified. Very tech and soft tech, which are the two new keywords. Soft tech is about, understanding culture and technology, and very tech is about verified technology. If it doesn't work for a community, do not absorb it. Do not endorse it. Make it work for them. Indigenous knowledge is very important to understand how people have survived for such a long time. And you have to create mechanisms to understand how cultural communities resolve climate problems, and transferring the knowledge, financing women in green tech as we spoke, and also highlighting the success stories. And on that last note, I just want to say something which is very important, and I'm very glad that Dr. Mohyeddin is with us as well, and Dr. Shrifa, and yourselves, that the face of climate activism has been young teenage girls for a long time, okay? I think that's a brilliant message. And I think that's a message we need to build on. Greta Thunberg, etc. We need to build on this. However, in Greta's path to climate activism, she has gone on education strike. She hasn't gone to school. And we really need to highlight this. At the beginning, I showed you a chart of women not getting into STEM, and therefore that is the end result, that we have less women leaders and decision makers. What we want, and is relevant for Africa and relevant for Egypt, is that every girl who's going to request her climate rights should not forfeit her rights in education. She should be able to demand both on a level playing field. You can't go on striking school because you're claiming another right. This is a message that we have to home in and drive in, because we want more girls educated, more girls getting into jobs for the future, and more girls becoming leaders, as well as being activists. This is a message that I hope that we really build on at COP27. Thanks so much. Yara, you're on mute.
Yes. Yeah, I was asking them to unmute me because I was mute. Thank you so much, Ms. Sarah, for this fruitful and discussion. For me, it's my first time to have such a presentation tackling aspects, the women, from the aspect of education, climate, finance, especially that your background is quite interesting for me. It's in architecture, so it's different than the work we usually do in economics, politics, and social life. And I quoted it already from you. She has gone on education strike, so there are less women leaders and decision makers, and she should look after that beside to her climate rights. I think I quoted it well. I tried to write it in a better way afterwards. So thank you so much for your engagement. It was amazing. And thanks for the recommendations. I don't want to go longer, to be honest, although everything you've discussed needs more questions to fetch in. However, maybe later in another round. So allow me now to introduce Ms. Betty Osi Bonsu. She is a project coordinator from Ghana at Green Africa Youth. We're happy to have you today, Ms. Betty, especially that we had a representative from North Africa, so now we have representative from West Africa, which is quite important for us also to talk about the sustainable project you are working on in Accra, in Ghana, and how do you see it sustainable that can be replicated in other as well, and talk to us also about promoting jobs for women across West Africa, your perspective. You are the last speaker. The other speakers hold on for very couple of few minutes, so that afterwards we conclude and we leave. Thank you so much. Please.
Thank you very much, Yara. So as introduced, my name is Betty Osei Bonsu, and I serve as a project coordinator for Green Africa Youth Organization. Several years back, I can recall when I was still staying with my mother, she would go to the market and take remnants of food from the market women, mostly proteins. And when she comes home, she used to prepare meal for us, and that would be one of our best meals. And they were mostly head of fish. Circular economy has always been a part and parcel of me from a young age till now. So coordinating the Gaio Sustainable Community Project is more like giving back to the community for me. With this project, it's a project that leverages on waste within community, an incentivized model of waste management within community, where community utilizes the existing waste within the system to generate resources that do not only benefit them, but benefit their community, or they can commercialize. With this particular project, we are able to divert waste from landfills. We are able to build a community's capacity. We are able to strengthen waste pickers and informal waste collectors movement. We are also able to divert waste from landfills. And I can say with this particular project, we've been able to generate a zero waste strategy that is currently assisting assemblies in Ghana to be able to efficiently manage the waste within their system whilst building the community's capacity. This project is a highlight for us, and we are hopeful that we are going to continue with this. This project, although serving as a circular economy-based model, it is strengthening youth movement within our communities. And this project, I can proudly say, is not only being done in Ghana, but we've been able to replicate it across regions and other countries like Mali, like Kenya, like Uganda. And I'm proud as a female to be doing this replication. I love the speeches that the other speakers came to put forward. And I'll say, yes, strike, it's time we strengthen the capacity of females to lead. Not only should we be doing the theoretical or doing the campaigning, but we should also be on the ground, causing that change we want to see. And I'll always say this, as a female as I am, and somebody who is causing change in my community, I am very, very skeptical about my unborn children, because whatever future I create now for them is what they would leave to meet. So as a mother, as an incoming mother, who should be very, very protective about his or her children. This is something I want to put forward and say that we should be able to create that future we want to see. As females, we should be able to even join the movement more and more. Lastly, I would like to end with this. Within my community, I once did a project where we worked with the World University Services of Canada, and we provided opportunities for women in the space. We trained more than 80 women in green jobs like making mushrooms using existing organic waste from the community, producing hives, beehives, producing compost, as well as making, what do they call it? Making organic soap, utilizing existing agricultural waste. With this project, we were able to train these women, build their capacity, and they were able to even stand for themselves, bringing on board small, medium-scale enterprises. And this is something I would want to advocate for, not only government institutions to continue with, but also individuals and organizations to keep on building the capacity of women and youth out there. Lastly, with the Gaio Sustainable Community Project, we do not only leverage on building the capacity of women within communities, but we are also able to provide alternative jobs. Like, for example, in most African countries like Ghana, there are a lot of sachet wrappers. There's a packaging with water. I don't know if most of you know that, but we call it sachet wrappers. It's mostly littered around, just found along the streets, in the oceans, everywhere. Gaio is able to utilize this particular waste, but we call it product. We utilize this, they sew it into beautiful products that these communities are able to commercialize. Not only this, we also leverage on organic waste within communities. Monthly, we are able to generate over 4,000 kilograms of compost, and these are just purely organic, and we are promoting organic crops within communities. Apart from this, we are also able to produce sustainable energy, utilizing agricultural waste, converting them to charcoal briquette, that these women and communities, they would not be facing challenges associated with firewood to energy or other types of energy products that are not sustainable for them. With this project, we are causing immense change in our communities, building the capacity of youth to champion alternative energies and see how they fit into the society. Within universities, within campus clubs, we establish eco clubs where we are building the capacity of youth to be able to see the future in green jobs. Because most people, although they are seeing the movements, they are seeing the circular economy movement, they are seeing the climate change movement, they do not know what it means to actually be in that space. So with Gaio, we are creating that space for youth, and more to come. I would like to end with this. Thank you so much for providing this space for youth as myself to be able to share the works I'm doing within my community. And I hope this would serve as a baseline for other youth to also create more change within their community. And heading on to COP27, I hope we will not only be talking about the problems within our community, but speaking about the solutions we've been able to create in our community. Thank you so much. My name is Betty Osei-Bonsu, and I look forward to seeing that future we all want to see. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty, for your brief and concise intervention in this panel. I'm really happy to hear the voice of a Ghanaian young lady talking about sustainability, the woman role in Ghana, and also stressing on the joint capacities, not only government, not only private sector, but also a participatory approach that you are seeking to have throughout your work. And finding alternative jobs for women. Because of time, there is no time to have a round of questions. I just tried to ask big questions for the panel to tackle different topics. And I'm grateful that the panelists spoke about climate change and gender equality, promoting gender equality from different aspects. I'm going to document all of that. I'm going to try to write a small report about this session because it's very informative. And you also gave us the chance to take from your knowledge and to exchange from your best practices that you're doing. As just Dr. Mahmoud was just saying, you have young generation that's more empowered and younger people than us too that are more empowered. This is because of you. You gave us this chance and this knowledge. Also, thanks, Ms. Dr. Sharifa Sharif, for your contribution here and being with us, although it was a very short notice for you. And we'd like to announce that there will be, that we would like to create a platform that could encompass more youth in Africa, that could tackle best practices that's taking place, whether startups, they're doing activities, initiatives, or they could also exchange some challenges that are taking place. And we agreed with Ms. Dr. Sharifa Sharif, I don't know if she's still here or not, that we are going to merge such a platform along with the initiatives that are taking place under the Institution for Sustainable Governance and Sustainable Development. And if Dr. Sharif, if you'd like to announce something like that, the inclusion of the youth, if you'd like us to help you with such a platform for the more engagement of African youth, we will be pleased by that.
Yes, thank you. They were just unmuting me. Yes, definitely. I'm echoing out exactly. It's a pleasure. We're in on, and we also have. We're going to be launching the Egyptian Development Portal in collaboration with, of course, the Ministry of Planning and UNDP. So I think we could ask Her Excellency if we could put a tab on youth initiatives. I think that would be a very good idea also to add and to disseminate more of the initiatives out there and share with other different countries as part of our best practices initiative. So we'll definitely tackle it together. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharifa. Of course, it's my pleasure, and it's our pleasure to contribute on something like that, on such an initiative. And I think we will proceed from now, and we will try to find opportunities and chances of collaboration. And we will try to reach out also to the participants that were engaged and announce for any further actions taking place. I'd like also to thank Ms. Sarah Batuti for her marvelous contribution today. She showed us a very good side of the private sector and how it's looking like, how it contributes, supports the governments as well. And I'm really glad that we had her today, because this is an example today for me. The conversation it wasn't only government, not only non-state actors, it was also engaging private sector and NGOs, like Betty, for instance. So I'm really glad that we were only a few in number, but good in quality. This is from my own point of view, and I wish that everybody thinks the same. I don't have anything more to add. It's just to thank everybody, and thank you as well for being very easy approaching. While I was approaching you, it was very easy for us as youth to have you here and have such a fruitful dialogue and conversation. I wish that in the upcoming period as well, that we tackle promote gender equality and tackle climate change challenges and best practices through real ground stories, not only posts on social media, or not only new policies or new recommendations that are written. We will try to make it happen in real life. I have nothing else to say except to thank you. Many thanks again for the speakers and attendees, and thanks to Samah as well for helping me on all of this. And for another time, until we meet again. If anyone wants to share anything, please let me know.